behalf of the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow, and the Rhetorica Literary Society of the Department of English, which is a society that has been primarily set up by the students of the department, I would like to welcome you all to this session today. And this year is very important for us because we are celebrating Beyond the Pleasure Principle, a centennial celebration of the essay written by Sigmund Freud, the founding father of psychoanalysis. And this month is important because this month, that is in the month of May, we also celebrate the birth anniversary of Sigmund Freud. So the two events come together. Now, Beyond the Pleasure Principle is important because here we have Freud talking about the two instincts. One is the life instinct and the other is the death instinct. Freud actually was influenced by the death of his own daughter, and let me tell you that his daughter Sophie died in 1920, and after the death of his daughter he fell into depression and he reformulated some of the ideas that he had already discussed in this essay, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. Now, we have three researchers in the department, and the three researchers have been reading and have been extensively working in this area because they have been looking at psychoanalysis, they have been analyzing texts from the from feminist standpoint, and these three young research scholars from the Department of English would initiate today's program, and they are the ones who are going to discuss the various issues linked with Freudian psychoanalysis.
I would now like to invite Vishakha Sen to make her presentation. She would go into a bit more detail about some of the ideas which have been introduced by Amrita Sharma and Soumya Srivastava in their talk. Vishakha will see the importance of psychoanalysis and will talk about its relevance in modern times. The title of her paper is Taking Pleasure Principle Beyond the Millennial, Implications and Applications of Freudian Psychoanalytic Theory.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. Good morning, all of you. I am Vishakha Sen, and I would like to take forward this discussion and taking pleasure principle beyond and discussing the implications and applications of Freudian psychoanalytic theory. So the first thing is I would like to request you all to quickly type one positive and one negative emotion that we all faced and experienced during this COVID crisis. So quickly, I would request all of you throughout this discussion, you can just send me one positive and one negative emotion, okay? And I would like to begin my discussion by saying that this text, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, was a turning point in Freud's life. Because in this text, he has discussed, he has changed, and he has also introduced new topics. So the very first half of this essay is covering what we call traumatic neurosis and transference neurosis. Now, these are clinical terms, but I'll easily simplify it for you all. And in the next part of this essay, he has discussed life instinct and death instinct. And these principles carried forward the legacy of Freud, which was again more than 50 theorists worked on it, reframed it, revisited it, and redefined it. So my first question is that, do you all know what a slide is? Do you all know that swing slide? You can just type yes in the chat box quickly. I hope you all remember a slide in a park and we would all play, right? So just assume a canyon ridge. a slide that is covered. So the slipping area is covered, all right, and the area which we step on is open. So when we talk about, Amrita and Soumya has covered major concepts, so I'm just using their concepts for this essay. Whenever you approach superego, ego, and it, just assume that superego is that green park, feet on the ground, and you're just about to step on the stairs. Now that stair part is the ego, and then once you reach the top, you're about to slide, you're about to slip. Now that is the moment of realization for all of us, because that is a free fall. We are choosing get into that push that is unconscious, that is it. Now in this essay, Freud discussed that it is this unconscious ego part that we have to focus. Now I would like to discuss that how unconscious enters into the consciousness. So these are drives, impulses, feelings, and emotions. What they do is, through two types they try to enter. First is through compromising, and second is through disguising. Now here comes the role of pleasure principle. Now do you all know what is a boomerang? Yes or no? Yes, you all have seen boomerangs. Yes. So what happens in a boomerang? Now pleasure principle is just a boomerang. What you do is that when you are throwing that boomerang, it is the wish that you are expressing and you want it gratified. And the moment that boomerang returns, it is a kind of a gratification. So your wish is being fulfilled, your wish is being answered. Now pleasure principle, the opposite of pleasure principle was unlust. He named it unlust. Now the reality principle acts in three ways. What it does is, it postpones the pleasure, it tolerates the prolonged unpleasure, and it also abandons any kind of possibility of gratification. So we'll remember these three kinds of ways through which reality principle works. Now moving forward, what happens is that our sexual instincts are very hard to educate, and they cannot assimilate in the inclusive unity of the ego. Now, so what we do is that these are held back at the lower psychical development from possibility of any satisfaction. Now Freud defined this through the use of traumatic neurosis, which is like a train accident. Any kind of trauma that we experienced in childhood that gives us a surprise, that is an external stimuli, and that has affected our psyche. Initially what happened was, Freud was developing his theory of anxiety, and through theory of anxiety he took off a detour and he entered into this pleasure principle and death instinct, where he said that anxiety does not occur by the internal impulse, which he initially hypothesized. Now he changed his view and he said that anxiety occurs through the external stimuli. Now there are three kinds of trauma or threat that we face. We all know what are the words fright, fear, and anxiety. Yes, but again, please focus on the connotations. Now fright, what is fright? Fright is the state when a person has run into danger. Suddenly you have experienced some unpleasant experience and you were not prepared for it, it was sudden. Whereas fear is a definite object one is afraid of without preparing for it. So we have phobias, we fear many things in our life, and we are afraid of that particular object. It is a particular object, it is outside, it is the stimuli, and we are not prepared for it. It is not happening, we are not facing it, but it is inside us. Now what is anxiety? Anxiety is very interesting, and we all are facing anxieties always, since postmodern era. Anxiety is a particular state of expecting or preparing for danger and preparing for an unknown danger, which did not happen in the past, which may not happen in the future, but still we are preparing for it, and we are expecting that this might happen, and you're scared and you're tensed and stressed about it. Now, quickly moving on forward, there is automatic anxiety and there is one signal anxiety. What is automatic anxiety? Here, Freud explained the example through a child whom he was observing. Now, children, when they are very young, at the age of 6 months and 1 year, their ego is not fully developed. That's what Freud said. When the ego is not developed, in the absence of mother figure who provides pampering, who provides caring, who provides fondling, now in absence of one person who loves you, what does the child do? His ego is not developed. That ego cannot satisfy his drive for asking for care and loving. In that case, he cannot postpone the gratification because infant's ego is not developed, and neither can he, hold back that drive. Hence, instead, the infant psyche is overwhelmed by an influx of stimuli. So, by the absence of mother, he is overwhelmed. The child is overwhelmed. And since an infant can neither master nor discharge, this anxiety is automatic anxiety, and we all face it. Now, other kind of anxiety is the signal anxiety. We face signal anxiety throughout our life. It is very normal, and it is the anxiety that we face during a danger that has occurred, and we have experienced that danger. Now, earlier, what happened is that anxiety of later influx, so anxiety when we grow up, anxiety when we are adults, is also in form of sexual lack of gratification due to external hindrances. Now, anxiety, what happens is, it has also been defined as war neurosis. So in war neurosis, you must have heard the name of that anxiety of being shell-shocked. So the soldier who has returned and who has witnessed and experienced all the traumatic incidents of war, that has caused, a kind of external stimuli, which gives the rise of anxiety. Even in the absence of that incident now, he has returned to his home, and even then, he faces that anxiety of being shell-shocked. Now, Freud defined 4 dangers. Now, what are these 4 dangers? So, at a very infantile level, which Soumya had discussed, and Amrita as well, there are 4 kinds of, types of danger. The first danger that we all experience as infantile is the loss of object or the loss of loved object. Now, what is that loss? Fear of losing the person who is important to us as a child and who is the source of gratification for a child. So from 6 months to 1.5 years, you have that, that danger lurking. And the second kind of danger is the loss of environment where that loved object or that object was giving you love. So when we talk about diaspora, when we talk about displacement, when we talk about Holocaust, when we talk about partition, when we talk about war, there is this kind of displacement that is happening. The environment get disturbed. The mother is present, the object is present with the child, yet the child fears, a lack of object's love. And then the third kind, you all know it is the fear of castration that Freud defined as happening to a male child who has a fear of being castrated, which was further, developed by Lacan. And then you also have the loss of genital part or injury that Freud gave for female child. Now this point that female child or infantile is has a danger of losing or injuring the genital part was profusely refuted by psychoanalytic feminists of later age, Simone de Beauvoir, Luce Irigaray, Julia Kristeva, and others. And the last is the danger of guilt. Now, when a child is 5 to 6 years, when a child is being punished, when a child is being scolded, or his wishes are disapproved, he creates a danger of guilt. And these exist in all of us. The only problem is that when it is excessive, it causes neurosis. and it can only be diagnosed and treated clinically. But Freud was in an attempt to move away from not only clinical practice, but he was trying to assimilate the chimney sweeper concept, the talking cure concept, where he was trying to attack and regulate that trauma that patients face. Now, pleasure principle is very important in this case. There are these case studies of Wolfman, the case of Han, which you can read, the case of Diora, which you can read. So in Hans and Wolfman, you all can know it's about wolves, something about castration, something about fear, and something about also the loss of mother. You can go through these case studies and find out that, these were the dangers that, the people were facing. Now, pleasure principle has a very important task. What it does is that it lets the ego check or inhibit any kind of id impulse on danger situation. Now, what does ego do? The unconscious part of ego, what it does is that it attacks any kind of perception, it checks it, is it safe or not, and if it is dangerous, if that impulse is dangerous, what it does is it competes with it, making a vigorous attempt to neutralize the energy of instinctual drive. The formation of identifications or the fantasies, ego keeps checking it, keep gratifying the impulse. And this is called substitutive repression. When you are substituting the impulse or drive through another impulse, through another emotion, and a collection of such emotions which is dangerous is called cathexis. It is a collection of drive energy. And what ego does is it creates a counter cathexis, a counter collection of memories and thoughts which stops and hinders the dangerous drives in a person. Now, if this counter cathexis weakens, if it cannot hold, cannot control, or cannot gratify the dangerous impulse, what happens is then it is problematic. So the very common example is an alcoholic. Now, alcoholic uses, abuses, is aggressive, and he has no idea of it when he is in a sober state. That's what happens. Patients are unaware of it. Now, in this case, dreams are quite an important method to analyze what that danger is, to pick that specific danger. Now, when we move on forward, what is the role of patient and counselor? Here comes the transference neurosis. Now, transference is a very complex method, but we do not have to fear it because it's very easy to understand. What happens is the role of a counselor, the role of a psychoanalyst, role of counselors in schools and colleges and universities is to uncover the patient's lack of conviction and courage to accept and correct that trauma and identify the resistance and work on it. So he lets the patient abandon all kinds of resistances and revisit that trauma with a certain aloofness. Okay? These are pointed out by the techniques of repeating and remembering. So the patient keeps on repeating the repressed material, but he does not remember it. If you ask the patient what is the problem, he'll say, I don't remember what happened with me in childhood. So I don't remember, and he'll just negate it. But he is actually repeating that same resistance material to stop that instinctual drive. Now, this is compulsion repetition. We all do it. Compulsion repetition is like failed relationships, like people who raise a person to certain authority and then suddenly they desert that person and they move on to next person. And when we hinge on fate, that fate occurs and we leave it on fate. So these are all compulsion repetition. We keep on repeating those hindrance. Now, as a disassociate visitor, the counselor helps the patient realize that it is an apparent reality that has become a forgotten dead past, but it is still there and we have to address it. So repression is then a mechanism. Repression, denial, undoing, these all are mechanisms and it is inherent in the ego, and hence this essay actually clarified that it is the task to excavate the compulsion repetition so that the unconscious repressed can be solved by unconscious ego. And he wanted all of us to be fiercely honest with our desires and with our instincts. Now, when we talk about, when we further carry on this discussion, he moved on to the theory of death instinct and life instinct. Now, what is death instinct? He defined death instinct, that is thanatos. It is to lead an organic life back to the inanimate sphere. And it is a goal to re-establish a state of things that was disturbed by emergences of life. So for all life to regress to that inorganic existence of matter. So death instincts is that when we are trying to stop everything that is lively and we are trying to move towards the goal, which is death. And that is a certainty. And again, life instinct and death instincts, it is all normal. But when it is accessed, it is a problem. And in life instinct, it is self-preservation. It is, it is regarding those component instincts whose function is to assure that a person shall follow the individual journey towards death and ward off all the negative external probabilities to death or to inorganic existence. Now, it is said that ego instincts, pressurizes or move towards death instincts. So ego at times, people like who have suicidal tendencies, who have drug abuse, or who have problem or disorder of substance abuse, what they do is that their life instinct, you all know a seesaw, right? So we have to balance it. So their death instinct is pressuring the life instinct. They want to die, they want to end their life. Now, this is all that this essay covered. And you all as young researchers and scholars, what is the role of us as literary scholars? Our role is to discuss how far was the application and implication of what all Freud said. Now, when we talk of Melanie Klein, what she did was she said that now when Freud said infant cannot address, cannot gratify by himself. Now, what happened is that, infants actually, that child actually tries to act out this absence of mother. How he does that is he takes a ball and puts a string to it, and when the string is going far, when the ball is hiding, he utters ooh, and then he pulls the string and brings back the ball, and then he utters ah. So he's acting out the absence of mother by playing with the ball and hiding and remembering the unpleasure. So he's somehow gratifying himself then and there. And Laka picked this sound of ooh when you're hiding your disappointment, and ah when you're addressing your disappointment. And it is then when Laka extended the story and he said that unconscious exists in the form of language. Now, Kristeva has also worked on a whole poetics of language. We have Klein who said that, infants have ego and they develop ego at the age of 1 itself. She refuted Freud's point and she said that, kids are angry, they throw tantrums, they are aggressive, and they have all kinds of emotion at the age of 1 itself. And when we come to Winnicott, so he also said that there is a form of true self and false self. Now, true self is like creativity. When you use all the life instincts for a better purpose, whereas false self is you're wearing a mask. And then we also have Erich Fromm, who also refuted Freud in the portion of narcissism. So when we discuss narcissism, again, it's a great concept by Freud. And while Freud said that narcissism is actually, secondary narcissism is negative because the person is trying to, patchwork the low self-esteem. But Fromm said that no, self-esteem and self-actualization is actually good. It actually motivates a person and it is productive. And so likewise, we have many theorists we have Dubois, who said that it is not the injury or the lack of genital organ in a female. It is the society. It is the social materialism that has created such kind of an ideological hierarchy, and you can call it a superstructure, where the female is forced to think that she lacks phallus, or she may cause injury, or whatever is her gift from God is a kind of a lack or an injury. And when you talk about individual, community, society, psychoanalysis, Freudian concepts can be applied to drug abuse, addiction, eating disorders, when you call it depression, when you are dealing with professional ethics at office, when you are dealing with all kinds of disorder of obsession, of addiction, of substance abuse, when you talk about community and society, diaspora, racist states of mind, you all know Franz Fanon. Yes, so you have art therapy for it, you have diaspora, you have feminist theory. They all have applied, they are applying, and Freud is quite relevant when we talk about social practices, social work. So we can all have an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research on it. And even my thesis is working on Indian psychoanalysis. So there is Kakkar and Jeffrey Kripal and Salman Akhtar who have focused on this point, this play of language, culture, and literature and life that affects us as an Indian self. So I would like to end my discussion, and I hope this essay and this discussion brought some clarity. And over to Onyal ma'am. Thank you.
So it's important that we discuss Freud, and we look at the important questions that he raised in the past century. And here we have, I would request Dr. R.B. Sharma to please come and, share some of his ideas with us. R.B. Sharma, I'll have to Dr. Sharma.
To everyone. And it was really great to see so many of our colleagues and students, their faces again. Long time, 3 months have passed. Almost 2 months that we are unable to see each other. Great to see you all through this video presentation. Congratulations to 3 presenters. They have really done a wonderful job, and we all know it takes great efforts to make presentations like this. So to all the 3 presenters, my good wishes for future researchers, and congratulations for the present. It's indeed very important essay because this beyond the pleasure principle, Freud actually moved away from his dominant theory of pleasure principle. And in this essay, he brings the idea of death instinct. Actually, what Freud was doing in his whole life was trying to understand how the human life plays out in its physical form as well as in its mental form, and how the two interact with each other, the physical as well as the mental. The mental life, earlier he believed, is driven by the pleasure principle. Pleasure principle is, it's also the life instinct. It is chaotic at one stage, something that we call id. It's an all chaotic store of pleasure instincts, and they are all regulated by the ego, because the superego, which is the social and cultural rules, regulations, life, that also is problematic for human beings. I will not take much time. In this essay, what he does is that he tries to make us aware that there are other instincts also which have huge impact on the mental life of human beings. And the other instincts that he talks is the death instinct. In one place he writes, the aim of life is death, in this essay. Now this was actually very problematic for others, those who were following Freud. And this essay has been criticized as speculative, not a philosophical essay, not exactly something that can be verified by the clinical practices. So this death drive, there are many things. I wish some of the research scholars would have brought out these ideas of aggression or repetition of many of the things in the past, how this aggressivity plays out in the mental life. So there are many human actions which actually are dangerous to human beings, yet they indulge in that. For example, aggressivity is going to cause a kind of injury to the human life, but even then the human beings indulge in aggressivity. Repetition of the past painful experiences, as we see in OCD and PTSD, they all play out. Even though this essay is not regarded something very informative from the point of view of psychoanalysis, but from the point of view of Freudian philosophy of language and philosophy of life. See, many times we differentiate between philosophy and psychoanalysis. And Freud is also considered a philosopher, not just a psychoanalyst. So from the point of view, his philosophy of life, this essay is, I think, the very important contribution. And we must seriously look at the death instincts that have role in our mental life as well as in our physical life. I thank you all. I thank you, Ranu Madam, for his great idea of holding this seminar by the research scholars, because they are the futures and they should be encouraged to participate in this kind of discussions. I hope to see you all again by some other research scholars participating in this. Thank you, Madam.
I think Dr. Sharma has summed it up very beautifully, the death instinct and the life instinct. And when we talk of Eros and Thanatos, we can see how they are locked in an eternal battle across centuries. So it is important that we see how Freud raises certain questions and we can ponder over those questions, seek to find answers. But let me tell you one thing, this was one of the most difficult writings of Freud. And at the end of this essay, he himself says that I am neither convinced myself nor am I seeking to arouse conviction in others, which means that everything in life is open-ended. And having written a long essay, a very difficult essay, having discussed the death instinct and the sexual instinct, where one has to move towards the purpose of which is to guide life towards death, that is the death instinct, and the sexual instinct which perpetually strives for and brings about renewal, because on one hand there is destruction and on the other hand there is renewal. So there is this constant battle that is going on between the two forces in our lives and the lives elsewhere. And let us, I would say that let us keep this forum open. And in our next session, we continue with the discussion. And I would like to thank all the participants for having attended this webinar, because this is the first time that we are holding this kind of a webinar. And I hope that the Rhetorical Literary Society, which the department has set up, which has been set up by the students of the department, will continue to hold such discussions and debates and readings and sessions where we would all come together on one platform and happily we would interact, exchange and enlighten each other with our points of view. Thank you once again.